Welcome all guests of the Filmfest Hamburg to this Q&A with David Osit, director of the film Mayor. David, welcome to the Hamburg Film Festival.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
My name is Dietmar Molthagen. I'm working at the Friedrich Ebert Foundation here in Hamburg. We are an independent institution for political education based on the values of social democracy. And we are proud to be the co-host of the Veto section at the Filmfest Hamburg for the seventh time running right now. The section with all the political films we are glad to show here at the Filmfest. When did you first meet Musa Hadid, and how did the plan to make a film about him develop in your mind?
I had worked in the Middle East off and on for several years, and also before I got interested in doing documentary film work, I was studying refugee law in Cairo and was going back and forth, and I had visited Ramallah a couple of times and Palestine a couple of times. But then as I got into documentary work, I was hired to be an editor for a Palestinian documentary called Off Frame, which is directed by Mahanad Yaqoubi. And I went to Ramallah, and it had been a few years since I had been there. And I was amazed how much the city had either changed or how much I was just noticing more of it in spending a longer amount of time, and that there were bars everywhere and nightclubs and a Jaguar dealership and free unlimited public Wi-Fi and all of these things that were rather surprising. And even though I'd spent all this time in the Middle East, I still couldn't help the fact that as an American, I'm really only receiving one image of what the Middle East is supposed to look like, a very monolithic, very one-dimensional portrait. And Ramallah didn't add up to that at all. Certainly not the fact that it was a historically Christian city and there were churches everywhere and Easter celebrations and Christmas celebrations. So I enjoyed my time there, and I came back home, and eventually we finished the film Off Frame, and it showed in New York at the Museum of Moving Image, and Mahanad came to New York to screen the film, and he stayed with me. And one night I just, out of curiosity, was asking him, what's the mayor of Ramallah like? And his reply was something along the lines of, oh, he's a very charismatic guy. He's very funny. He vapes all the time. He has a good sense of humor. He's very charismatic. I know his brother. He's Christian. And I think all of a sudden a light bulb was going off for me, thinking, wow, this is quite an unexpected city, but also maybe perhaps an unexpected mayor. Absolutely. Democratically elected, not appointed, but democratically elected by people. And I just immediately, my brain was full of questions, which is always the genesis of my films for me. And in this case, the question was, what is his job like?
You definitely did a good job in bringing to us new images of Ramallah, and no doubt the mayor Musa Hadid is the leading character of your film. I will ask some questions about him in a minute, but I want to start with the supporting actor. I think the Oscar for the supporting actor goes definitely to The Fountain. We just saw in the very end of the film. We saw beautiful pictures of this fountain, and also bad pictures, when it was demolished in the meantime, and we learned that Musa was so eager to choose music for the fountain. What did you personally see in this fountain, and why did you give this fountain such a big role in your film?
Well, throughout the entirety of filming, I noticed that these civic projects, these beautification projects, even the festivals and the Santa Clauses descending from the rooftops and the flash mob, one could look at those very scornfully and say, oh, this is a strange thing to put your energy into. But they very clearly to me early on were tremendous sources of dignity and pride for the mayor and his staff, and certainly for many people in Ramallah as well, to be able to have expressions of positive civic discourse, to be able to show pride, to be able to celebrate their home, to be able to have public space that they could celebrate in, and to lead at least attempts at normal life despite the military occupation of their country. I thought early on I wanted to have the experience for the audience. Perhaps you're thinking in the first 20 minutes, I'm not sure why these people are so excited about the Santa Clauses, it seems, and also maybe like a little bit too much effort being put into this compared to other things. But I think as the film goes on, I hope that an audience can realize that there's only so much that can be done, that there's roadblocks to being able to effectively run the city otherwise because of the limits of the occupation being imposed. And something as simple as a Bellagio-style water fountain becomes a tremendous symbol of dignity. And to be able to have this space not being defiled, it is in the scene before, as you mentioned. When I first filmed that fountain, and when it was finally completed after a year of filming, I think I was expecting it to be quite, minor as an edifice when it was completed. But upon seeing it, I found myself being moved to tears when I first saw the display of it, and seeing this crowd of people around it, and seeing just how emotional it was for some people. And of course, some people maybe are not biggest fans of the fountain because of the noise every night in the summertime, and uh, everything is complicated when it comes to, nothing has full endorsement. But for me, it seemed just like the perfect visual symbol, and also seeing how much work and effort Musa was putting into it over the course of this time. It's a thing that he could control.
In one meeting in the beginning of the film, Musa Hadid says, "Our first task is to provide service for the people. Political opinions and campaigns follow after that." Normally, this local level is seen as the boring part of politics. So what was interesting for you? What did you find out new about this local politics on the example of Ramallah?
It's a wonderful question. For me, I was thrilled to see a public elected official doing his job, because I live in the United States, and I feel that politics in the United States often are entirely tangential to the work that a politician is supposed to do. They're much more about performance. They're much more about collecting more funds, collecting more votes, collecting more public appreciation. And Musa, as a mayor, was, of course, there's campaigning that happens, and there's, the need to please your constituents, but also I was thrilled to see that the work that the municipality would be doing would be the very unglamorous work that comes along with trying to run a city. And also for me, just in a deeper level, knowing that the film would feature this mundane work, but to be able to juxtapose it against the banality of this mundane work, but also the banality of how omnipresent the occupation of Palestine is. And being able to put those two things next to each other, I had a theory as I began filming that I thought it would really highlight the horror of the occupation because of how banal it becomes, and because of how commonplace it can become when it's generational and when it's ubiquitous and it's constant. So for me, focusing on the minutia is also a way to show an underreported side of the effects of occupation on a country. I think the focus is typically on death and terrorism and the sheer obvious inhumanity of what can happen in occupation. But what about civic space? What about the 2-block square radius of your home that can be defiled at any moment, that's not under your control? What about just the common dignity that you would expect from being able to have a local government, like your sewage treatment, like your festivals, like your streets being paved? These are things that a Western person, perhaps who's never grown up under occupation or has lived in Western Europe or in North America their entire lives, I think would never imagine being part of the wavelength of talking about occupation, because those aren't the images that are reported back to us.
Did you and your film team ever felt afraid about your situation while doing this movie?
Yeah, well, I should say that the film team was me. There was no one else, which at times made it much more frightening, because in some of the more violent moments that were being filmed, there was really no one else I could talk to except to just try to be present with the camera. But in a way, it's more of a mental escape.
There's one scene in the middle of the film when Mr. Hadid speaks directly to you, so that the roles borders are crossed in this very scene, and he asked you, as an American filmmaker, do the American people know what's going on here? And you were, in the first time and the only time in the film, raising your voice and answering the question, "I don't know." Do we find in this sentence of you the political motivation of you for making this film, to bring to the American public and also to the public elsewhere, like in Hamburg, a different picture of what life in Ramallah is like?
I think you see in this moment, my intention for including this moment was, I think that there are lots of symbols in the film. For example, I think the German delegation you mentioned it can be the symbol for me as I watch the film of what liberal people in the world wish Palestine would do differently. People who are supporting Palestinian rights, but kind of wish they would just stop it already.
And they clearly make obvious that they don't have a clue about the situation on the ground.
This I think is one reading that one could have, but I think also it's just the general. I like symbols in films, and I wanted this film and the edit to feel as though there are specifics, of course, but there are also symbols. And I think that in that moment, I think perhaps throughout the film, you're wondering, I mean, what is the deal with this film? It's very intimate, and someone who's filming this has clearly a relationship with the people that are being filmed. And I wasn't looking to put myself in the film, but I think in that moment, I represent you as an audience. And when I say I'm not sure in that moment, I think it's because I'm truly trying to give an answer that reflects what I think most Americans would say, for example, which is not no, not yes, but I don't know, sort of an indifference, a casual indifference, which is, I think, the way a lot of Americans feel about what happens in the rest of the world, a casual indifference. One of the reasons I wanted to make this film was to attempt at least to create a little bit more awareness and questions and curiosity within a Western audience that is, at least at this point, the only group of people that can put pressure on any elected officials in the West to say we're unhappy with the circumstances here. We are confused as to why this is allowed to happen and why we're supporting the debasement of an entire group of people.
Thanks for this talk, David Osit. We need to close this Q&A session right now. So what are your final words to your Hamburg audience you are virtually speaking to right now?
I'm so grateful to everyone in Hamburg that has just watched this film. I implore you to think about what the next time that anything comes up in conversation regarding Palestine or Israel or the state of this conflict, to remember that there are people like Musa and people like the municipality of Ramallah who are trying to just live as normal of a life as you have.
Thanks very much for this talk, David Osit, director, editor, and cameraman, as we learned, of the film Mayor. And thank you for your great film. Warm greetings from Filmfest Hamburg.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.